Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Durst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I work with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the United States. What sets them apart? A lot, but there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet, the people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The insight track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of the uncertainty of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Josh Fox, welcome to our episode today. For those who don't know you or your background, why don't you tell us something about your life and your work journey? You can start back. I know that you're a University of Michigan alum. Kind of go back to there and build going forward.
Bob, thank you so much for having me today. Of course, it's our independence from our country and a time to reflect on what's going on. So a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings for everybody. I feel honored to spend a little time with you to have a conversation. So thanks for inviting me on. It's interesting we're going through this economic downturn and this pandemic because when I started this company right after 2008, it feels similar. And when I say it feels similar, I remember when the stock market was at 6,000. I remember when every time I opened up a media publication or turned on the television, it was corporations firing their employees. I think most people remember 2008. It was a mortgage meltdown, and it was because of the financial crisis then. This time it's a virus, so it's a different cause, but the effect is the same, which is massive layoffs, massive unemployment, financial crisis. And that's when I started my company. 2009, I came up with the idea to start this business called Bottom Line. And I just thought there had to be a better way for corporations to keep their employees working without having to fire people. And there had to be a better way for corporations to find savings for their business without letting their employees go. So it just feels very interesting 12 years later to be still helping corporations keep people working and save jobs and figure out creative ways to save them money.
I'm so excited to hear more in terms of how that has played out in the work world. So Josh, where have you, either for yourself and your own personal life story, or for someone else who has asked you, been a part of a transition? Talk with us about that process that you laid out for them.
Well, I think a lot of people in our world today, want to become entrepreneurs. And that is a real catchphrase today where people, don't necessarily want to work for someone else anymore. They feel like they're talented enough and they feel like they have a risk tolerance to be able to become an entrepreneur. But I love the term kind of wantrepreneur versus entrepreneur, making a transition from having a job with a salary and benefits where it seems very cushioning and safe to being able to start a business where you're not going to make any money and you may never make money, depending on how you succeed in your business. So for me, when I transitioned from having a job with an income to having a job with no income and starting a company, I mean, to me, that was definitely, one of the most scary, if not the scariest part of my career, was knowing that I didn't know what the future held and giving up a really safe bet that I was in.
Josh, why would someone want to give up that job and that income to become a entrepreneur? What's the driver of that?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's a feeling of self-worth. It's one thing to get a job and work for somebody. It's a whole different thing to be able to start something yourself. It's like the difference between ordering food and just getting it delivered to going to the supermarket and buying all the ingredients and making a fresh meal. I love analogies. I think that's such a great analogy of like buying pre-cooked food delivered versus making a fresh meal. Like it's a different sense of accomplishment.
Is transition management different for an organization than it is an individual who is going through the transition?
For sure. I mean, I think this world is filled with being able to have support systems. And when you're going at something really by yourself, it's much more difficult than transitioning as an organization and having people around you to support you. It's a big emotional roller coaster, highs and lows and ups and downs. But when you have a group of people surrounding you, I think it's a much easier transition to have that group.
What are the characteristics of an individual that you think can be effective in helping someone through a transition?
I mean, one of the most important things is not to take things personal. We're all very sensitive people, especially in today's time where, there's a lot of emotions going around in our world. But I think it's the concept of being able to really not take it personal and to understand that everyone has a different way of communicating with each other. I also think someone who's a risk taker, being able to know that you have tolerance for risk is super, super important also.
How do you think a person or again, an organization can set themselves up to be effective for a transition?
It's like chess. I think the best chess players in the world are the ones that think 10 moves ahead. But most people who play chess can only look, 1 or 2 moves ahead. So the people that have transitioned the most are the ones that are really future-based thinkers that can think so far into the future and think about the what ifs today that may happen down the road.
And no doubt one of the things that can help you in terms of that is that you've established already a network to help support you. How do you coach friends, maybe colleagues, to network effectively? And then a kind of a follow-up question to that is, what if I'm the shy, introverted type? How do I use that style and still be effective at networking?
So one of the keys is to be able to know what you're good at and being able to admit what you're bad at. And the key is to really focus all of your attention on the things that you're good at and then find people to support you to do the things that you're bad at. So if you're not really good with people or you're not really good with networking or you're a shy type of person, that's okay. Why don't you go hire a couple of people that are really good and surround themselves with you so that when you go to a charity event or you go to a networking event or when you show up at a bar mitzvah or a wedding, those sound great to be able to be in large groups again, but to be able to have someone to break that ice. Some people are really shy to like break the ice and to walk up to strangers, but they're pretty good. Like once that door is open, being able to communicate. So, hire a couple of people around you that are good at that other part.
Josh, I've heard all kinds of transition techniques, but to hire a wingman in a bar mitzvah, that's a first for me. What are the struggles or the setbacks you've seen an organization or an individual do when they're dealing with a transition?
It's people, people, people. You have to be able to have a good group of people around you. And I think personnel and hiring is one of the most difficult things today. When you meet someone for an interview or you meet someone at an event, I mean, how much time do you really spend with them? How well do you really know them when you choose to work with them, to hire them, to bring them on board? And like anything in life, you're always going to see the best in people early on. You're not going to get to know kind of the inner workings and some of the shortcomings of people until you really spend a lot of time with them. And I think that's a real issue when you're transitioning and trying to choose the right people around you. The other issue is I see a lot of people choosing like family members and friends, people that they feel comfortable with personally as part of the team. And I think that can be a real rabbit hole to go down. It's a very delicate balance between choosing strangers that you don't know anything about them and giving them a chance, and then surrounding yourselves with family and friends and possibly giving them a job and an opportunity that may be really tough too.
You know, Josh, one of the things that I'm sure you as a entrepreneur, and certainly people that are in transition have to use this, is an elevator speech. Talk to me about what your thoughts are about an effective elevator speech. What are the component parts of it, and how do you use it, again, to either market your own company or market yourself?
That is so important. You know, you get that 30 seconds, you hop into an elevator, and you happen to be standing next to someone who's super relevant in your industry and your career and can make a couple of small decisions to make a huge difference in your future. So having that very confident 30 seconds where you know exactly what to say to somebody is super, 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 super relevant. And in our business, you know, if I were to give you kind of our 30-second commercial, I would say what we do is we work with corporations to look back in time to get them refunds from the past. And we also look forward to help them save money in the future. Either way, we become their partner and we share in any savings and refunds to be able to help the business become more profitable.
Wow, that summed up a pretty complex business in a very bite-sized and manageable discussion point. So thank you. That's a great example.
I think there's a couple of other tidbits that you can kind of shoot off of that, because what you're really looking to do with a 30-second commercial is you're looking for people to engage with you, to say, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'd like to hear more. I'd be interested in learning more. I mean, you know, you have a great 30-second commercial when you get that type of response. And, you know, one of my fun ones is I love the term TGIM. And then people look at you kind of strange and say, well, what's TGIM? And I say, well, thank God it's Monday. And they're like, you like Mondays? I said, yeah, like I get bored by Sunday early afternoon. I'm ready to go back to work. And I really look forward to coming back to work on Mondays. I mean, it's a pretty special thing to be able to have a career where you really look forward to going to work.
I really like that. I'm going to use that, the TGIM. Thank you for sharing that. Josh, you, I'm sure, get your share of resumes that come across your desk from people, whether it's during these COVID times or just in normal times. What are the three things that you look for in an effective resume?
To me, the most important thing in any person is not even like where they went to school or where they worked. To me is what kind of heart does a person have? You know, that's not something you can teach. I mean, I go for heart. I go for loyalty. I go for determination. You know, I love people whose parents are still married 40, 50 years later. I love people that still are friends with their friends from childhood. I love people that bring together people in social gatherings. I love people that are comfortable around other people.
You'd have to hire me. My parents had their 76th wedding anniversary last year, but I get what you're saying completely.
It's just so nice to hear people whose families are still together, who spend a lot of time together for all the holidays, you know, as opposed to people, it's like, oh, I haven't talked to my brother in 20 years. I haven't talked to my sister in 10 years.
Josh, for yourself, what keeps you grounded when you're going through a transition? What techniques, tips do you use?
I really subscribe to some interesting ones, and they really, really are helpful to me personally. So for example, like I do acupuncture every week, and I think that's just an incredible old way to really relax yourself and to let your mind go. I mean, I'll sit there for an hour on a table with 100 needles inside of me, and I got to tell you, it really helps me like de-stress from the week. I get a massage every week. I mean, I take that hour to really like completely detach from things. So I'm really into like eating super, super, super healthy. Like I've done vegetarianism for years at a time. I think what you put in your body is how your brain works or doesn't work. You know, you are what you eat, you are what you drink. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people, especially younger people, turn to like alcohol and drugs and other items like that to really just disguise what's going on in their life And I've done the exact opposite. I've done everything I can to be super, super healthy to keep my mind and my body feeling good.
Yeah, our last guest was an acupuncturist and a holistic medical provider. And it is just incredible the entire linkage between healthy body, healthy emotion, healthy outlook on life, and a healthy life in general.
It's just amazing. Like when I think about a week where I got good sleep and I did all those things like I've just mentioned, and I'm eating right and I'm going to the gym every day, like life just seems to work itself out without me even trying to work it out. And then in days where I don't get a lot of sleep, or I happen to go out late one night or anything like version of that, life tends to be giving you kind of weird things.
So, Josh, you've talked a fair amount in terms of the things that you would recommend for an individual or a company that's in transition that works. Let's take the flip side of that coin. What are the things for, again, the individual or the company that's going through that transition that you've seen not work so that the transition goes badly?
Well, negative thoughts, negative experiences, positive thoughts, positive experiences. That's kind of the way that I live my life personally. So like one of the things that we've done, and this is a cool exercise, is it's all about protecting your confidence. If you're confident, you can typically conquer anything. And if you're not confident, you're going to have real issues in transitioning. So one of the things that we do at my company is every Friday, we have everybody submit what we call positive focus. And those are the 5 to 20 things that happened to them the previous week that were very positive. And we go back to those month after month, year after year. When someone's confidence is down and they're feeling negative, we just ask them to go back and read all the positive things they wrote down the last month or two to be able to get a refresher and to take a reset.
Great idea. Any thoughts, recommendations in terms of journaling or vision boards or other techniques that might be used?
I definitely don't do it enough, but I love the vision board concept. I just think you are what you could think, you are what you see, you become what you envision. So it's super, super important to be goal oriented, but not to just be goal oriented, but to really jot them down and to have that vision board. So, if you have the vision that you have a certain car that you want to be driving in 3 years, put a picture of that car on that vision board. If there's a certain city or place that you want to be living, put a picture of what that city looks like or what that house may look like. If you're single and you want to get married, put a vision of what your spouse or significant other might look like. All of that, like, it's amazing. Like, we all think it's conscious, but there's so much subconscious that we can't necessarily control. But with things like the vision board, you can definitely influence it.
Do you think that, again, whether it's an individual or a company, transition management is done differently today than it was when you started the company?
Well, for sure. Everything seems to be so technological these days, where you might have had like a traditional journal or you might have written things down in pen. There's just so many apps now, whether you want to track, your sleeping patterns, you can do that through technology, or you want to track, your weight loss and things like that, you can do that through apps. So I just think the technological side of things are so advanced with what you're trying to accomplish and how you're trying to transition that it's just much easier today to measure and manage your goals.
Yeah, the tough part with technology is that if you make a mistake, all it does is speed up that mistake and the implications. And sometimes you can hide behind the technology. How do you guard against that, I guess?
I mean, everybody's different. I think the problem that I've seen over the years is that if you're trying to change somebody, like really change them as a person, and they've lived on the earth for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that's just not going to happen. And I just see that way too much, whether it's in a personal relationship or a professional relationship, that we all try to change people the way that we want them to act or to speak. And that's just a terrible, terrible road to begin and to pretend that that's possible. So I think it's finding people that have your vision, have your goals, have your ethics, have your morals. And everybody's different with those things, but to try to find people that already have them and not try to change them into what you want them to become.
Josh, communication is a huge part of your business. Again, whether you're dealing with people in a company or people that reach out to you and look for advice and support. What's the most effective method to communicate with a person or that company that is going through a transition?
I can't think of anything in our entire conversation so far that's more important than this, and that is effective communication. Everything works very well when there's open dialogue and healthy dialogue, and everything seems to fail when there's lack of communication and unhealthy dialogue. It's just incredible how many misunderstandings, misrepresentations that occur, and then decisions are made, feelings are hurt, friendships are ended, business relationships are finished based on misunderstanding and miscommunication. And that's even in marriages. People tend to get divorced and to separate from each other because there's a lack of communication. And I just try everything I can to be as open and honest and frank with people as possible. Sometimes that's my fault. Maybe you've been hearing my New York accent, but I'm just as direct and as open and honest as possible, even if it hurts someone's feelings.
I don't know if you've ever coached someone that had this, but let's just say that someone is in transition and they have something bad in the past, a gap in their employment, maybe they got terminated. How do you coach that person through that bad history?
Being a great listener is always better than being a great talker. And sometimes, and even most of the time, I would say, people just need someone to listen to. They just need you to shut up and listen to them and let them speak and let them share their thoughts and their feelings. And they feel a lot better that there's someone who genuinely is willing to listen to them, genuinely concerned about what they have to say. And eventually you can rebut and respond to the communication, but be a great listener instead of a great talker.
So I'm sure you have right now companies that are struggling because of the COVID crisis, and maybe some individuals as well. Companies maybe have gone out of business or had to shut down. Individuals have lost their job, and they're looking to you to help give kind of that, what's the first step I should take? What's the second step I should take? What's the third step? What would those 3 steps be that you'd share with them?
Everyone has to curb their spending. That is a huge part of it. We're all very uncertain about the future and what's going to happen to our personal wealth and our businesses and our employment in our country and our world. So the first thing that people have to do is look at where they're spending money and just be much, much, much more careful and cautious with what they're doing in terms of spending. Secondly, I think people need to expand and enhance their network. We were talking earlier about kind of networking and people. It's just amazing how many great stories I've heard about people who've reconnected on social media, who've gotten in touch with old family members and friends, who said, you know what, life is short. We don't know what the future holds, but let's repair an old friendship that was not good, or let's repair an old family friendship that wasn't good. So this goes back to networking and communication. Like, reach out to your network, reach out to your family, like listen to people, be open to a conversation that maybe you weren't open to a couple of years ago.
Let's talk just a bit in terms of that social media. How do you use that, again, as an individual or as a company, to help you through the transition?
There's so much positive on social media and there's so much negative on social media. And it's really about kind of getting rid of all of the negativity. The news just brings such negative energy and negative comments. And the key is to be able to focus on the positive.
As you're going through a transition, there are going to be times that you're going to be successful at it. There are going to be times when you're going to have setbacks in it. How do you take those victories and those setbacks and learn from them?
In my opinion, you have to document everything. The problem that I've seen often is that people will go through experiences in life and not be able to really document and have a chance to reflect. The key is that everyone's going to go through positives and everyone's going to go through negatives, but can we take the negatives and learn from the negatives, document kind of how you ended up there, and then prevent it from happening again? And I just love the old school, like pen and paper. We talked about kind of technology versus old school. I love just having a journal, writing it down, being able to go back to it, putting it in your own handwriting. It just feels differently.
Josh, any resources or tools that you would recommend for someone who's going through a transition that would help them out?
Yes. The concept of a mentor is, I think, really diminished these days. Everyone needs to have those 2, 3, 4 mentors. They don't have to be necessarily older or younger. I think it has nothing to do with age. I think it's that you need different mentors for different purposes. And that mentor has to be able to be someone that you can lean on, someone that you can count on, someone that you can ask advice. And it doesn't have to be just like advice per se. It has to be someone that's willing to give an honest opinion and someone who's willing to help you when you're really down.
Describe a mentor that you've had in your life, and why do you think that person was successful and impactful for you?
Oh, my mentor is definitely my father. I can't think of anybody that I look up to more, that I respect more, that I care about more than my own father. I mean, I just think about the sacrifices that he made growing up and my mother made to be able to afford me a great opportunity to go to a great college like the University of Michigan. I mean, those 4 years that I spent in Ann Arbor, Michigan were by far some of the best growing I've ever been able to accomplish. And, you know, I know being able to go to that school from an out-of-state person was a super, super expensive situation, but my parents did it. And they also gave me the opportunity to go live in a foreign country. I got a chance to live in Italy for about 6 months as I was growing as a young boy. And that experience to meet and to go to all those different countries and to meet people all over the world was just irreplaceable. So it's definitely the support and love and affection and sacrifices that my parents made that's allowed me to be the person that I've become.
Have you ever heard of a mentor getting fired? And if so, kind of why did it go off rail?
It's all about managing expectations. If you go into a mentor relationship expecting A, B, and C, and by the time, you know, that relationship kicks off and you're getting D, E, and F and your expectations are not met, then, you know, you're not going to be able to enjoy the relationship. So I think it's all about, you know, setting expectations and then managing expectations.
Josh, you talked about life experiences, living overseas and the University of Michigan experience and relationships that you've had as well. How do you use those life experiences to help you, whether you're going through a transition or just as you're managing your life and your career?
Well, I think what's been great, you know, we talked about a lot today, but it goes back to some of the things we talked about earlier, which is networking and building, establishing phenomenal relationships. Like when I went abroad, the people that I met, the relationships that I have kept throughout these years, the people that I met at Michigan and still talk to this day, I mean, that's really what's helped me, is just knowing the right people to call for the right purpose at the right time when I needed these people, and people that I can trust and lean on to support me when I needed them. So it's all about building a phenomenal network of people all over the world, ideally, that you know you can count on those people when you need them. And I'm talking about something as small as, you know what, I want to go to dinner tonight and that restaurant is full, but I still want to go to that restaurant for some reason. And if there's someone that I can call to get me a dinner reservation, it could be something that small.
How you build those relationships and use those, you can't be a taker all the time. You have to be a giver as well.
It's so funny. You just literally stole the words out of my mouth. Like, the best way to establish a relationship is to give without expectation of getting back. Because I think what happens over time is if you're constantly giving, it's not that you're going to get back necessarily from that person you gave to, but the world will give back to you in a positive way.
Josh, what are the 3 things that you want our listeners to remember from what you told them today?
Number 1, people. If you have great relationships and great communication with the people in your life, you are as rich as anyone out there. Who cares about money? Money comes and goes. If you have great relationships with your family, if you have great relationships with your coworkers, if you have great relationships with even the person who parks your car at the valet, you know, it feels really good to me when I go valet a car that I know the guy, I give him a good tip because he deserves it, and we have a respecting relationship. So people are the key to everything. Number 2, your personal health. You must do things every day of your life, whether it's getting a good night rest, not turning to things like drugs and alcohol, being healthy, putting good things in your body that will lead to you feeling good, looking good, and living a long, healthy life. So your health is super, super, super important. And number three, do something you love. It doesn't matter about money. If you do something you love every day, thank God it's Monday. If you get up every day with a passion for what you do, for a love of what you do, the money will eventually come.
Josh, what have I not asked you about transition management that you think could help an individual or a company that you'd like to share at this time?
You didn't ask me about my animals.
I hear them, but go ahead and tell me about your animals.
Oh, I mean, I think people that are kind to animals are kind people in general. People that can't be kind to a dog or a cat or a gerbil or a pig or a goat or a sheep, I don't care. My belief is that all species are created equal. It has nothing to do with religion. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe that every creature on this earth is created equal. No creature is more or less important. And I got to tell you, my dogs that are my family, I treat them as if they are humans. They deserve to be treated like humans, have helped me throughout my life. I've never had a year in my life ever since I was born where I did not have animals in my life. And it's fulfilled me in a different way than humans ever can.
That is so cool, Josh. I really respect you for that. Josh Fox, thank you so much for joining us today. The caring and sharing of your experiences, of your thought process, of your heart means a lot during these difficult times. And I know I can speak for all of our listeners to say thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. Have a good 4th of July.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We're working in unprecedented times as the world responds to the recent COVID-19 crisis. The fact is that even those who are not in transition understand it could be right around the corner, next month or a year from now. The purpose of these episodes are to give listeners support and the critical tools to adjust with the winds, wherever they come. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully, perhaps gracefully or without too many battle scars, survived their own obstacle courses and can share useful information on how to steady your ship or your world in this uncertainty. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on social media. If you have any questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time you're investing in sharing these important conversations with me, my guests, and others who are going through life transition. Transitions between jobs, life stages, new entrepreneurial ventures, or whatever life brings. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode of People in Transition.